How are you guys doing? You guys need to get up and walk around for a little bit? You okay? Little dance? No? So I've been working on this for about 9 years now. So if I look a little excited and enthusiastic and I wave my arms in the air, it's because I've been trying to figure this out. Does anybody know what these are? This little plant here? Anybody? Iris. They grow by rhizome. They spread. Does anybody have them in their garden? Sneak around? Yeah? Yeah. Does anybody ever try to control them or stop them from spreading all over the place? No, you can't do it. So this relationship between the idea of the tree as knowledge and the idea of the weed is the one that I want to talk about today, but it's going to take us a bit to get there. We've only got a little bit of time, so I'm going to race through here. But first, I want to thank you all for inviting me for coming, because it's cold in Canada right now. And it was really nice here. I appreciate it. This is actually a real picture from my island from last year. We got 18 feet of snow. Yeah, challenges. So this is what we do in the wintertime, is try to figure this stuff out. First premise, we need to learn to confront complex problems that don't have clear solutions. And we've been talking about this in the last 2 talks, right? You know, in the opening, we heard that we need to be able to do lifelong learning to survive going forward. Right? We're not talking about simple things that we need to pick up, not the capital of Uruguay, right? We have complex problems we need to overcome. But that word complex is a tricky one, so I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about it first. So when we talk about complexity, I like to use Dave Snowden's models. Anybody know Dave Snowden? Kinevin framework? One Kinevin framework person back there, great. So Dave talks about uncertainty and the ways in which that we confront it. And I'm going to use 3 of those pieces here just to make sure we're all on the same page. The first thing, these are simple problems. We've got lots of them. Some of them are figuring out the capital of a country. Little problems we need to confront. How do we share? How do we solve this problem? Anybody? Did you just say break their neck? Do not eat one of the guinea pigs. That is not a solution. There's a lot of simple solutions that we can do. These solutions are easily measured. Right? They don't require subject matter expertise. And abundance, the abundance that we have out there is really great for this. Get on to Google. If you've got a problem, you know, you can look at that problem and go, oh, no problem. I'm going to run out to the internet, and somebody out there is going to have a solution to my problem. Easy to fix, right? Oh, I went to ask.com. I found this beautiful way. All I got to do is weave these up, and it's done. It's a solution. There's one simple problem. We can go out, find a bunch of different simple solutions, and the problem stays solved. We confront these kinds of things in education all the time. We give people definitions for words. We give them a foundation inside of whatever field that we're doing. And these are important things to teach people. At the next level up, we start talking about things that are complicated. Complicated things have many, many steps in the process. No, I don't know what this equation means. Does anybody know what this means? I have been told that it's not actually correct. But I don't know, it's a complicated process. It requires deep subject matter expertise, right? It's more difficult to measure somebody doing a complicated process. Sometimes there's more than one way to do it. It requires that subject matter expertise. And the abundance that we have now, all this information, makes this a little dangerous, because some people have access to complicated steps that might get them into trouble. So if you try to do this on your own, for instance, by stuff you found on the internet, it might be a little bit complicated for you, the dangers involved. But the thing about this, the thing about building this airplane, is that every step in this process has a clear and defined answer. And there better be, because the plane's got to fly, right? It's a step-by-step process, just a gigantic one. It is very, very complicated. What it is not is complex, because complexity is something different. When we talk about complexity, we're talking about things that don't have clear answers. So I'm going to ask you a question about the next picture. Does this woman look happy to you? How many people think the man is doing a good job? as a couple of men just lifted their hand. Right? Now, if I'm going to help this guy out, like, there's no simple process here. When you look at it, it's not directly measurable. You guys have a sense that things aren't going well for him. But there's no real one solution, right? You can only work out bits and pieces of the problem. And abundance collapses this. So if you look online, you'll find the 10 steps you need to pick up any woman you want. The problem is there's no 10-step solution for this poor man. I could change his pants and make them nicer. I could maybe, tell him to back off a little bit with the mandolin in the face, or the lute in the face. But each one of those solutions is not going to fix the overall problem. It is a complex situation, and love just happens to be one of those things that is complex, no clear answers. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page before going forward, complicated and complex, we're going to play complicated and complex. Check the time here. I was told within an inch of my life not to go over time. I will not. Okay, so complicated or complex? Landing on the moon, complicated or complex? Complicated. Giant number of steps, but still, every one of them is achievable along the way. Climate change, complicated or complex? Complex. It's a weather system. Who knows? Bits and pieces, and there's economy and all kinds of things involved in trying to confront that particular challenge. Video games. This one's tricky. Usually, complicated or complex? Complicated. And this is the thing about using games for learning, is that if the games get students to do it more, but in every case there's a clear answer, then we're teaching them that the problems they confront are problems that they can always answer. And certainly my life experience hasn't necessarily led me to believe that. And lastly, because I have to give you a picture of my kids. Aww. That's better, okay. Raising kids. Right. Wrong. 78% is what your grade is on raising your kids today. And this distinction between complicated and complex is at the root of what I want to talk about. Because what's happened, this really weird sort of historical process has happened, is as we've gotten more abundant access to knowledge, we've reduced the complexity of the teaching. And it's been a trade-off, because in one sense, more and more people have had access, but what we've given them access to has been less and less complex. So let's do a quick travel here. How did knowing become content? Where did we get this idea that learning was a process of delivering content? Where did this come from? So we're going to start back in 62 BC. This is an awesome project at Stanford that measures how long and how expensive it would be to get from one city or another in ancient Rome. And this is the path that Julius Caesar took to get to the Isle of Rhodes, where Apollonius Molon was, who was the best teacher of rhetoric at the time. And Molon taught two famous people from that era, Cicero and Caesar, and both of them were the very, very top of their game. Caesar took over a good chunk of the known world, and a big, big part of his armor was the ability to stand up in front of people and talk, a thing that he learned with Apollonius Molon at Rhodes. So at this point in the process, way back in 62 BC, not a lot of access. We're only talking about two people we know about. But what they were doing was having that direct conversation, that direct mentorship relationship. Something that we can still do today, but as Miguel told us earlier, something that doesn't scale very well. Even when you get to 25 or 30 people in a classroom, he tells us, it becomes difficult to be able to do this. So let's skip ahead a little bit. I just love to read this out loud in front of a crowd. Those who wish to scrutinize the bosom of nature to the inmost can hear at the University of Toulouse the books of Aristotle, which were forbidden at Paris. In 1229, the city of Paris banned Aristotle's physics because the information in it was too good. It threatened the church's foundational control over the way the world was made. So this is from an ad campaign from the University of Toulouse in 1229. And what they were saying is that you can come and somehow take in the bosom of nature from Aristotle. Now you have to understand how this process would work, because they would be sitting by themselves, sitting in a group, and there'd be one guy touching the very, very precious book. It might be the only one within 500 miles around. And somebody would read it out and you would hear the bosom of nature, right? So all of a sudden, from content being the process of interaction, content becomes dead people. So what we've got is Aristotle, still glad we can hear Aristotle, but all of a sudden we're one step removed, right? Plato, or Socrates, said that he hated the idea that we were going to write things down because it meant the argument was dead, right? It meant that it couldn't answer anymore. And somehow the listener was less for only being able to listen. And the argumenter had no chance to grow their idea anymore, because once it's written down, it's finished. Does anybody know Pestalozzi? Pestalozzi, 1, 2, 3. He's my educational hero. I love this guy. Pestalozzi built some of the most interesting and beautiful schools in Switzerland in the late 18th century. But he realized that only the rich kids were able to go. So he had this beautiful dream where he was going to teach all of Switzerland how to read. All of Switzerland. And when you look at that and what he was trying to get done, he had 100 teachers available, all these people scattered all over the place. So he had this idea that if you could take knowledge and chop it into little tiny chunks and organize it so that you could open up the cover and follow through, then the person at the front of the room really didn't need to know anything to teach. As long as they could go through this textbook, everybody could learn. So all of a sudden, and this is from Pestalozzi, from How Gertrude Teaches Her Children, I assert definitely that a school book is only good when an uninstructed schoolmaster can use it at need. And now all of a sudden, content becomes that textbook. And then when we jump ahead to 2012, and I apologize for this, does everybody know the word MOOC at this point? MOOC, yeah? I have the terrible misfortune of being the person who coined the word MOOC in 2008. I'm sorry for those of you who are being bothered by this word still. This is from a Coursera course in 2012 on equine digestive anatomy. I tried this multiple choice question 6 times before I got it right, and realized what Miguel said earlier, that what I guess in the opening, that if you're not passionate about it, it's really hard to get engaged. I don't really care how many incisors a horse has. But this is what we've come to, right? At this point, when we're talking about innovation and we're talking about abundance and we're talking about access, people are talking about these giant open courses, or they're talking about the availability of the content all over the web. And my question to you guys is, that 4-minute instructional video, is it going to help people confront complex problems? Because MOOCs are abundance gone wild. All of a sudden, what we're looking at for learning is not a mentorship relationship between 2 people. It's not one person standing up in front of a crowd and giving the sort of wisdom of one person from the ages before. It's not even an uninstructed schoolmaster interacting. It's a person by themselves watching a 4-minute video and doing multiple choice questions. And I posit that this will not allow us to confront complexity. I don't think so. So what do we do about it? And I think the answer there, and where things are so important, is that we need to remember why we're teaching and what the purpose of this education system is. So when we go back to the tree analogy from the beginning, this to me, the idea of walking up to the tree, pulling off my apple, here's my knowledge, I'm going to walk away with it, is the system that we had designed for us, the one that we've inherited. This is from the 1876 Commissioner's Report in the United States. There are similar ones from other countries. Standard 4, and they were talking about Britain's education system. Standard 4 in Birmingham. In order to pass Standard 4, you had to read a few lines of poetry or prose at the choice of the inspector. Can't imagine what the inspector was like. A sentence slowly dictated, and arithmetic, compound rules, all easily observable tasks. And Standard 4 was relevant because Standard 4 in Birmingham in 1870 was what you needed to reach in order to be able to get to the factory. That was the grade. Once you got Standard 4, you could go and work in the dark satanic mills. You could go work in the cotton mills, right? Because what they were doing was training a populace to work inside of the factory. Our education system, the assessment model that we have, all of those pieces are designed around success being finishing. Once you've accomplished the objective, the learning is done. And yet we've started this whole conversation saying that lifelong learning is our goal. And in my mind, we have to shed that model of the tree, that model of learning being finished, that model of assessment as being something that you can see on a multiple choice test, because what we are doing is teaching people that learning is something that gets done. And it can't be. It can't be if we're going to go and do it for the rest of our lives. So my question then is that if learning is not that, then why are we teaching? What is the purpose of this whole process, this venture that we're on? Including finishing on time. And to me, it's about citizenship. It's about citizens who can look for answers, not look for the answer. And I think of this as vitally important because I think of the really important problems that face our citizens when they vote, the critical important problems you look at right now around the world, the problems that make us frustrated because we look at them and think, how do we ever solve this? What do we do about what's going on in Syria? Well, there's a drought. We can't make it rain. There are all kinds of bits and pieces involved in that process, a complex situation. So if you're taught to believe that things have answers, and you look at that, you have two choices. You can despair and see that there are no answers, or you can choose one answer and focus on it blindly, the ignorance of the complex situation around. And I think that our education system supports this now. So I posit the rhizome as a replacement for the tree. This is a Japanese knotweed. It's an insanely invasive rhizome. When they found it at the Olympic grounds in England in 2012, they had to dig down 30 feet and dig around it for 30 feet to make sure that the rhizomes were gone, because it's that resistant and resilient. It grows and spreads of its own. It's difficult to contain, and it follows their own path. Can you imagine that? Just those two things, difficult to contain and follow their own path inside of our education system. Imagine students following their own paths and how we contain them inside classrooms. Well, it's tough. It's a different way of looking at it. So, we have complexity. We have how abundance threatens complexity, how we start to simplify and things get more and more simple as we get more. And we have this idea of the rhizome being a response to that, navigating the complexity, riding that wave of abundance, following the path through it, trying to find answers. So how do we do it? Well, let's look back at how this looks. The tree stands for simple and complicated things, things that have answers, and we definitely have those in our society, and I'm not suggesting we shouldn't teach them. But they can't be the goal, right? Clear learning objectives make real good sense whenever we're talking about the capital of Uruguay. It doesn't make good sense when we're talking about global citizenship, because global citizenship is one of those complex things that we need to give space for. We need to leave people grow in their own way. We were talking about before, it's going to be different country by country, right? The student ends up being the follower, and that's where learning is measurable, right? That's where your standardized tests are useful. Once we cross over to the rhizome, once we end up in complexity, we're talking about learning subjectives, right? We're talking about the student being the leader. And the trade-off there is that it's not really measurable. And it's not something you're going to be able to get on a test. It's something I would totally believe that a teacher can say, yes, it's happened, or no, it hasn't. But in terms of it being 76% happened, I'm 85% a global citizen. Complexity doesn't respond to those kinds of things. So how do we do it? And for those of you who are interested, the after session, we can talk about details. We're going to try to finish on time. The first piece is open assessment. You need to break the assessment model if you're going to allow people to deal with complex situations. You need to allow them to create their own models within which they can assess themselves, within which their peers can assess them, within which you can too. You need to open the curriculum. So when I teach this with teachers, for instance, we build a curriculum together based on the things that we can find and pull together, because that is the experience of a teacher. You do not walk into a classroom confronted by a situation you don't know how to fix with students who are not learning and be given the path to fix that. It's something you learn as you confront it. You work with other people to find it up. So you need to open that curriculum as well. The approach that we talk about is orient, declare, network, cluster, and focus. If you can teach people to approach learning in this way, where they figure out what the landscape is, they find themselves, they declare a position for themselves inside of that, they find network connections to work with, they find closer connections to dig in with, and then they start to focus on the challenges at hand. When we talk about new pedagogies, to me, this is the kind of thing that we need to start to move towards. Bounded by analytics. So one of the nice things about doing this digitally is you can start to track that people are doing stuff. You can start to track the way connections are coming together. This is from an open course that I taught earlier this year. Each one of those dots is a person, and those are the connections between them. The colors that come out are the different kinds of conversations that emerged during the course of that project. And in some cases, I didn't even know they were happening until I found the analytics, found the color, tracked it back, and found out that a whole little community had started to grow inside of there. So instead of allowing the content to scale, instead of just doing more, instead of just focusing on all the things, we can scale the community, scale the people. Because the difference in where we can find scale for those 25 or 30 people in a classroom, or the 500 people in an online course, or the 15,000 people in an online course, is with the other people that are there. The community can scale, and you can get that direct relationship if you have the people there to do it with. It creates diverse perspectives, it creates practical literacies, and real connections between people that last past the length of the course that you're doing. Because when the community becomes the curriculum, the what and the why of learning start to come together. The process by which we learn is engagement into the community, and the goal for which we learn is becoming part of the community of knowing. So when I ask again, what are we teaching for? To me, we're teaching citizens who will raise kids. We're teaching citizens who will deal with climate change, and teaching them that the curriculum is not some content that someone has set before that they're just supposed to acquire, but the curriculum of learning is actually other people. Thanks.